exceptional.
Will the World Baseball Classic be a good or a bad thing for the handful of Reds that will be participating in the tournament? We're going to discuss on today's Locked On Reds.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Reds. Thanks for making Locked On Reds your first listen of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. I'm your host, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside Jeff Carr, and we are diehard baseball fans. We have a passion for the Cincinnati Reds, and we have taken our love of the game, our passion for baseball, and we have turned that passion into information for you. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking the World Baseball Classic. The rosters were announced yesterday, and several players from the Reds organization will be participating. Before we dive into all of that, I just want to take a second and shout out our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. All right, Jeff, the rosters were announced yesterday. There weren't really a lot of surprises, I don't think. Maybe I'm a little surprised that there wasn't a hitter or two for Team USA, but the pitchers are coming on strong. They are representing their home countries, and there's some exciting developments as a result of that.
Yeah, there's a couple of key and really just bullpen guys. I mean, Luis Cessa could possibly be in the starting rotation conversation throughout spring training, but for the most part, we're talking about dudes out of the bullpen that the Reds have going to the World Baseball Classic. And before we really dive into these lists and kind of what it means for these guys, I do want to ask everybody, since we are live on this Aloha edition of the podcast, want to ask you your thoughts. Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think it's kind of a worrisome thing that Reds players are going to the World Baseball Classic, including probably, actually, no, I think when I look at this list of players, the most important player that's on this list for the Reds is Alexis Diaz. He's going to be pitching for Puerto Rico out of the bullpen there. And when you're talking about the guys that we will kind of shout out here, the worry that I have, I think it's a good thing for the fact that they're going to be on display a little bit, but I do have a worry about how quickly they have to ramp up to full competition for this thing. And is that going to make them susceptible to an early season injury?
You know, I guess there's two schools of thoughts with that, Jeff. Yeah, they're going to ramp it up faster than they normally would. And I think they'll probably pitch more innings. You know, there's going to be more, I don't know, adrenaline, more effort. These guys are going to be pitching for real versus a lot of what we see in spring training. But I think the trade-offs are worth it. To get to watch Alexis Diaz pitch with his brother, to get to watch the battles between the nations. I'm sure you saw I posted yesterday my favorite World Baseball Classic highlight. If you missed it, go check out my Twitter timeline for yesterday, where you can see Team Canada and Team Mexico from 2013 just absolutely try and murder each other with one of the best brawls I've ever seen. So, there's some good moments that come out of this tournament. I know a lot of people initially thought when baseball kind of pitched this idea that, it's not going to be that well liked, it's not going to be that well followed. But I think people are into this.
I do agree. And I think also from the standpoint of ramping up, there will be better competition here. You'll be able to see Alexis Diaz, Rivar San Martin is pitching for Colombia, Luis Cessa for Mexico, Ian Gibaut for Great Britain. You'll be able to see these guys face actual major league hitters, because we always talk about in spring training, so-and-so did really good, but what was the talent on the other side of the field like? Were they pitching against major leaguers, or were they pitching against the guy who's just hoping to make the AA roster for that team? There's a lot of question marks there. I think in this case, the countries are trying to go with their best possible players. And I think, kind of to your point a moment ago about the Reds didn't have any position players on anyone's roster, let alone the American roster. I low-key think that there's a part of guys coming back from injury like Jonathan Indy and Tyler Stevenson that probably didn't want to participate in this, simply because the quick ramp up, they need that slow build of spring training to kind of get ready for the season and not necessarily go 0 to 100 as quickly as they possibly can.
Yeah, and it's a bummer also that we're not getting to see Joey Votto possibly for Team Canada as Joey's career winds down. Freddie Freeman is playing first base for Team Canada, and I think it would have been great to have Votto and Freeman both on that roster together for the World Baseball Classic. But wasn't meant to be. Joey's not quite ready yet. But you're probably right that the injuries kept most of the well-known offensive position players from playing in the World Baseball Classic, and the young guys. I'll tell you what, I am glad to see names that aren't on this list. I'm glad I don't see Hunter Green on this list. Yes. I'm glad I don't see Nick Lodolo on this list. Early. I'm glad I don't see Graham Ashcraft on this list. Yeah. And I think I'm probably glad also that the young hitters like Spencer Steer, I'm glad he's not on this list somewhere. Yeah. I want them to dial in. Noelle De La Cruz. I want to see those guys dialed in and focused on making this team better and being healthy for the Reds when the season starts.
And I think that that's going to be an interesting element to this as well. Like and I want to hear Bobby or C. Trent, I want to hear them ask David Bell, like, how do you evaluate your own players' performances in the World Baseball Classic? Because there are some guys who are going to be vying for spots. We talked about Cessa maybe vying for a rotation spot as opposed to a bullpen spot. Ian Gibaut, while I think he's probably a lock for the roster, is a little bit of a weaker lock than some of the other names on this list. But then there's also another guy, and we mentioned him the other day on non-roster invitees to look out for in spring training, and that's Tayron Guerrero. I keep going back to this 104-mile-an-hour fastball that he's gotten, and it touches 104. It doesn't average 104. But still, that means that this dude throws hard. He's going to be pitching with Rivar San Martin for Colombia, and I want to see how he does, because if you can put that kind of dude into the bullpen, you're going to only increase the value of the Reds bullpen.
Before I forget, for all you folks out there on YouTube watching us, when we were prepping for the show, we were talking about Guerrero, and I mentioned Pedro Guerrero to Jeff, and he had no idea who I was talking about. He asked me, like, who's Pedro Guerrero? What did he do? And, I couldn't believe he had no idea who. If you know who Pedro Guerrero was, drop it in the comments. I want to just see is it just me? Do I just remember obscure 80s people that play baseball, or is Jeff really missing the mark here?
I said, there's Pedro Martinez and there's Vladimir Guerrero. You combine them together, and that guy sounds
Pedro Guerrero is a real dude, Jeffrey. But you make a great point, and I think yes, guys going to the World Baseball Classic, it's going to be harder for David Bell to evaluate. He's going to have to look at it through a different lens. They run the risk of not looking as good because, as you alluded to, the pitchers are going to be facing major league hitters where others might not be. But, you know, the flip side of that is while those players are away from camp, it's going to give other guys opportunities to get more playing time and do more things and get more attention from the coaching staff and possibly play themselves into a better position than they might have been if it was baseball as usual this spring training. So I think there's a little bit of both things there. It's going to create some opportunity for other guys, and it's also going to make some guys that might be on the bubble, like Ian Jabot. I agree that he probably is going to make this team, but you know, he's not super safe. If somebody else has a lights out spring, he could get bumped. So, you know, he has some pressure, I think, to go pitch well in the World Baseball Classic so that somebody doesn't take his spot.
I'm curious too, and I think that this is a good thing overall for Teheran Guerrero and for Ian Jabot, guys who are a little bit on the bubble here. I don't know that this is such a good thing for Luis Cessa, because if he really, and he has mentioned in the past, he would like to be a rotation pitcher. If he really had aspirations for that, I'll be curious to see how Mexico uses him, because if he's just coming out of the bullpen, he's not going to be ramped up to be a starting pitcher. And so then you're talking about what the Reds did last year, where he comes into the season prepared to be a relief pitcher, and then at some point they say, okay, now go out and, you know, throw 4 or 5 or 6 innings for us. And he's just still not going to have that buildup. So I'm curious to see how Mexico uses him, because that could actually negatively affect Luis Cessa's prospects at pitching out of the rotation this year.
I'll say this, Jeff, it's going to be some exciting baseball to watch in March. And we don't usually have that between watching how these pitchers perform in the World Baseball Classic and all of these position battles that the Reds are going to have, and the maneuvering that David Bell is going to have to do as far as figuring out who's going to play where to get the best lineup on the field. It's actually going to be kind of fun to watch all of this baseball in March, when, you know, in other years, maybe we didn't pay attention as closely. There's a lot of stuff going on as soon as they start playing games out in the Cactus and the Grapefruit League.
No, and there are a lot of superstars from other teams that are involved in this World Baseball Classic. I'm super excited. I think, as you know, from our perspective, from fans, this is going to be a very good thing, because I'm very much looking forward to the World Baseball Classic. But you know what? I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Let us know in the comments section. What do you think about this? The different guys from the Reds that are going, is it going to help them? Is it going to hurt them? And also, as we kind of move into, we're going to do a little bit earlier, we're going to start on these questions and comments that we've got from the comments section. What are your thoughts on what the opening day roster could look like? I want to hear from you on that. That's down here in the comment section coming up next. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to let you know about today's sponsor, and that is FanDuel. FanDuel is the only app that you need for your Super Bowl party this Sunday, because FanDuel is the #1 sportsbook in America, and it's the official sportsbook of Locked On. And they have a very easy-to-use app. You can download FanDuel now so that you can bet the Super Bowl, and you get a no-sweat first bet. That's right. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown during the game. Lots of great stuff. I got a feeling, and I know that, you know, a lot of people are still butthurt about this guy, but I got a feeling Travis Kelce is going to score a touchdown in this game. I think he's going to cross the end zone for the Chiefs. And if you want to check that out, you can go over to FanDuel right now. Best of all, you get your paid winnings instantly. It's so easy to use. Literally, go join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/locked-on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Make every moment more with FanDuel. They're the official sportsbook of the NFL. And with sports gambling being legalized in the state of Ohio, we've got a podcast for you here on Locked On. It's called Locked On Bets. It's going to help new and seasoned gamblers put a couple of extra bucks in your pocket. Lee Sterling is a sports gambling insider. He does a fantastic job of making picks. Won me a couple of bucks last night on the Orlando Magic beating the Denver Nuggets. Yeah, He called that. So he knows what he's doing. Check it out. Locked On Bets, just like Locked On Reds. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Steve, I know the folks are a-talking. What are they saying?
Oh, the comment section is already going off. We're going to do 2 full segments here on the audio feed. And then as always, when we wrap up the audio feed, we'll just continue rolling right on through. So let's dive into the first question. Now we'll start with Scott Campbell. Now that the Reds have Benson, how would you construct the lineup? We've been asked this a couple times, Jeff, and I think it's still way too early to figure out how we're going to do this. I think there's a few more pieces we need to know about, and I need to know for sure what the platoons are going to look like. But I think it's going to be a situation where the Reds have a different lineup almost every day. There's going to be a lot of juggling and moving around. I don't think there's going to be anywhere close to a set lineup other than, if healthy, Tyler Stevenson is batting fourth.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we had, a low number of lineups. Like, I know that every year there's always a statistics on how many lineups different teams have, which, by the way, does not always coincide to success. The Dodgers, for instance, had so many lineups. I think they were like one of the top 5 teams with how many different lineups they have year in and year out. They play the matchups, they play platoon. So it's not a situation where platoon equals bad team. But also, I look at this and I think that Will Benson almost makes the middle of the lineup easier to predict. I think with Benson in tow, I think he's going to hit 5th, and I think Will Myers is going to bat 3rd, and you're going to have Joey Votto batting 2nd. At least so far as when I look at the good percentile of their performances. Like, if Joey Votto's hitting well, he's going to hit 2nd. If Will Benson's hitting well, he's going to hit 5th. And Will Myers is going to hit 3rd, simply because of the overall consistency with his hitting game. Benson's a lot more power heavy. We noted, he's not going to have that high of average. Don't necessarily think you want that dude batting 3rd, but batting 5th, right behind Tyler Stevenson, when the pitchers are done pitching to the best hitter in the lineup, what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to throw strikes, and Will Benson's going to crush those strikes.
I know this doesn't happen very often, but I want to disagree with you just in that when Joey Votto comes back, I really want him down around 5th or 6th until we're sure who he is and how healed he is and what he can do. He's 39 years old, coming off major shoulder reconstruction. I move him down and let's make sure what's going on. I know that's an unpopular opinion, Jeff, but I just think that they should put him in the best position to be successful.
So let's follow up on that then. Would you bat Jonathan India 2nd, and would you try to find a different leadoff hitter?
Yeah, I think that's the direction I would go. I think Spencer Steer may be up there sooner than later. I would keep India up there. I like Will Myers in the 3 spot, batting just in front of Tyler Stevenson. So
there is an interesting argument to be made. I'll see how his on-base ability plays at Great American Ballpark, but Will Benson could be a top-of-the-lineup type dude because he gets on base a lot. I mean, we're talking about a dude who walked near as much as he struck out last year, so I'm very interested to see how that translates to his new team. But, yeah, I think I agree with you, too, about the idea with Joey Votto because he's not Joey Votto of 2021 even. So I was about to say 2017, but not even really 2021. We'll see what he's got. We're thinking comeback player of the year, but to expect him to be the number 2 hitter out of the gate, yeah, you're right. I'm probably a little bit off base there.
So Jimmy McFarland's watching today. He just says hi to us and that he loves Locked On. Happy to have you here, Jimmy. BR7 is messing with my heartstrings here, Jeffrey. Look at this. BR7 says, Aloha Lopez. That is not nice. I don't like it. No, listen, like we talked about yesterday, obviously Aloha Lopez was the last man on the 40-man. The Reds don't see him the same way that we do, and I hope that he catches on someplace else and has tremendous success wherever he ends up with a team that will appreciate him and give him an opportunity to show what he's got.
And, there's things that they know that we're not privy to. I mean, who knows what he's like in the locker room, what he's like behind closed doors. Hard to say from our vantage point, but what we saw on the field didn't seem like that bad of a player.
Zordan 1992 says he was very surprised to hear Benson is a player that the Reds can build their outfield around. And two, he asks about Nick Senzel. Is Nick Senzel a bad player, injured all the time, or both?
Now, before we answer this question, how do you say that name again?
Is it Zordan?
Okay.
I don't know.
So we're talking about me not knowing Pedro Guerrero, and you were probably a little bit old for this, but that's Zordon from Power Rangers.
Oh my God, Jeff. So you don't know who Pedro Guerrero is, but you can tell me about the Power Rangers.
Yes.
Oh.
Anyway, yes.
All right, I tried. Listen, I wasn't as moved by this trade as Jeff was when it first happened, but after looking at the numbers a little bit more, looking at some of Benson's ratings as far as his scouting numbers, and then listening to Jeff, you and the Locked On Guardians guys talk about this a little bit, I've gotten much more excited about it. I think there's a tremendous opportunity here to have a great platoon combination out in center field, no matter who the right-handed portion of the platoon is. Hopefully it's Nick Senzel and they push each other like we talked about yesterday. But whatever that platoon looks like, I think the outfield is much better in 2023 than it was in 2022.
And I think the important thing to know, my excitement for Will Benson is based on if he can live up to the profile, because the profile is exciting. A guy who eats pitches, a guy who understands plate discipline and understands he needs to see a lot of pitches, can hit those pitches very far because he has lots of power, and he still has the range and the arm to play very well defensively out in center field. He's got decent base running skills, not a guy that's ever going to steal you 30, 40, 50 bags, but he's going to be, fine on the base pass, not going to be a liability. So we're talking about a dude who overall, his all-around game is something that the Reds don't have in their minor league system. We hope that Jay Allen can develop into that guy. We hope that the Reds have maybe Matt McLean or somebody that they can move to the outfield and their bat translates and their defense translates and all of that stuff works out. But Will Benson is a center fielder. Will Benson doesn't have to be moved anywhere to become a viable piece for this Reds team. So literally all he has to do is show it to us. Get on the field, get those hits, get those homers, draw those walks, have that on-base percentage that's nearer to 400 than 300, because that was something that we can look up and down this roster last year. They didn't have that. Hit those home runs, hit for power, get the high slugging percentage that we've seen from him at AAA, because that's also something that the Reds didn't have. He's bringing a lot to the table that we didn't have in guys like TJ Friedl and Stuart Fairchild.
And to answer the other piece of this, the second part of this question was, is Nick Senzel a bad player or injured all the time or both? Listen, I think Nick Senzel is a tremendously talented guy that has a lot of unrealized potential. And there are a lot of reasons why that happened. Some of it is Nick Senzel's fault. Some of it is the Reds organization's fault. And some of it is nobody's fault. It's just baseball. Yeah. And I still hold out hope that Nick Senzel is going to be able to put together a season like we've expected from him all along. I still think he's capable of doing that and playing like the first round draft pick that he is. Now, it's not a guarantee. It's not a lock. And Nick Senzel really is running out of time to show us that, but I still think that it can happen.
And that's the hardest part about that, is because the expectations were so high. Number 2 pick in the draft, we looked at him like we look at Elly De La Cruz now. We look at him and say he's the guy that changes the fortunes of the franchise. And now, as he stands, he's a utility player. And that is just absolutely nowhere near what we expected and hoped for from him. So that's where a lot of the frustration comes with Nick Senzel. And yeah, I'm with you. I really hope he blossoms. But at this point, I don't think I expect.
Well, listen, we are going to continue to take your questions and comments. There's plenty more time for us to do that. Plenty more opportunity for you to get your questions and comments into the chat, and hopefully we will get to as many as possible. But before we continue on with that, I want to take a minute to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's podcast. In part, we are brought to you today by Built Bar. If you are looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories, then you gotta try Built Bar. With Built, it's healthy is actually tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious you won't think that they're good for you. You think you're cheating on your diet. They're perfect to maintain the great start to your New Year's resolutions. They'll keep you on track. They'll keep you focused on your diet. They'll make you think you're spoiling yourself when you're really sticking to your goals. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like candy bars while maintaining amazing statistics. I tell you folks all the time when we talk about Built bars, I love stats. We love stats here. We're a baseball podcast, and Built Bar has amazing stats. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. These are the protein bars for you. And now here's the best part. You don't need to wait around by your mailbox to get a box of Built Bars delivered. For years, we've been telling you to head over to built.com to order your Built Bars, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. You can head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And I can guarantee you Jeff's drooling right now just because I said the puffs. If you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run in and grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. I love the churro ones, guys. I keep them stashed in my locker at work. They're great for a middle of the night snack in the old ER. Go pick some up today. You can thank me later. Speaking of things you can do later, in between shows, you can follow the podcast on all platforms, including YouTube. Make sure you click subscribe. Make sure you click the notification bell so that you know when we go live like today and you never, ever miss it. In between shows, if Twitter is working, you can follow me over there at S. Offenbaker with 2 Fs. You can follow Jeff at Jeff Carr. That's Jeff with 3 Fs. And you can follow the show, as always, at Locked On Reds. All right, Jeff, let's dive back into this thing. Mark McWhorter says he hopes Benson doesn't become another Aquino. God help us if he becomes another Aquino.
That was something that I even asked our Guardians host and Justin Latta. If you didn't get a chance to check out that video, it's very informative because Justin knows Cleveland's minor league system like Doug Gray knows the Reds minor league system. He is very knowledgeable about it. And he talked about Benson and said that he is very good at pitch recognition. He is not a guy that's going to be a free swinger that's just flailing up there at pitches that are breaking out of the zone and into the opposing batter's box. Like, he's not going to have bad swing and miss strike. As he said, there's going to be time to time that he looks at a called third strike, but it's not going to be, 1, 2, 3 and you're out. He's going to have long at bats. He's going to be a nuisance to pitchers. So because I was just like, big power, heard about big power before, but Aquino didn't tend to hit anything else but home runs. And he's like, no, that's not the case with Will Benson.
Michael Jensen checks in and says, with the more even schedule this year, if you're not aware, Major League Baseball has changed the format of the schedule. It's a balanced schedule now. Everybody plays everybody. It's not division heavy like it has been in the past. So Michael Jensen saying, with that in mind, do we think the standings will be a bit tighter for all teams? I don't think that's going to be the case with interleague play and the way everybody's been bouncing around for the last several years. I don't think it's going to make the divisions any tighter. I think if anything, it's going to make the bad teams look a little bit worse.
I think, and what you said right there, I think for that reason, the NL Central might actually be tighter. Now, I don't know about the West and the East because those are good divisions, but the NL Central itself, we've seen the Brewers take a step back. We've seen the Cubs take a hesitant step forward, maybe diagonal a little bit. The Pirates are getting better, but I don't necessarily know that they're a playoff team. We could have 4 teams, with the Reds included, that are all in that 70 win range, but also not really even close to the playoffs at all. And it's going to be very tightly knit because that NL Central, if you look at the division to division records over the last couple of years, the NL Central has just been a punching bag for every other division. So I think that it's going to hurt the NL Central, and it's going to hurt the teams within the NL Central because they don't get to play each other as much.
Boy, you're really just doubling down on the whole Reds are going to win 70 thing, aren't you?
I'm telling you.
Oh my goodness. Johan says he is looking forward to making it out to Great American Ballpark this season, even though the organization didn't care to stop by Indianapolis during the caravan. I thought that was weird too. And I think that just kind of goes back into what we were talking about. Was it yesterday? The days are all a blur. When we were talking about the caravan and how I think the focus that the Reds put on the caravan really shifted to not a lot of focus at all, not a lot of energy or effort, I think, went into the planning of the caravan, at least this year.
Is Indianapolis's omission due to the fact that they're a AAA team for the Pirates?
Could be. In previous times, I know that the Reds put effort into Indianapolis. So
it's true.
But they had a presence in Indianapolis. So that could very well be all that it is. But if all this clamoring about an expansion team in Nashville continues to hold true and some of Reds country is going to be whittled away, you would think that the Reds would be putting effort in any place that they can. And I know there's Reds fans out in Indiana that would turn out if the Reds came out there and put on an event. So something for the Reds to keep in mind. We always half jokingly, half seriously say we know somebody from the Reds is listening. So whoever it is that's listening, tell the bosses to get the caravan back into Indiana because people missed them this year.
And that's more so from the team perspective. Like, I don't think that, the Reds were trying to gauge based on, well, we don't know that there's a lot of Indianapolis Reds fans. Like, I'm sure there are, because just because you have a minor league team for another organization doesn't mean that you're automatically a fan. Like, I don't think Indianapolis is a Pirates town. I think if anything, they are a Reds town. So I think it's probably more so like the Pirates are just like, don't you dare go there or walk the plank.
PR7 brings up thanking me for the history lesson. Had no idea that Canada and Mexico ever went to war. It was really, this is talking about that video I shared on Twitter yesterday about my favorite World Baseball Classic memory. And they went to war. It was a whole thing. Go check it out. It's worth the watch. The video that I posted is like 11 minutes and it's worth every second to watch how that whole thing went down.
I don't remember that. I'll have to go back and watch that.
Pat checks in, says, listen to the episode from yesterday. He thinks that the Benson trade came together quickly and was off the radar when the decision to bring Alejo Lopez on the caravan went down. That's probably fair. But listen, even if they didn't think they were going to trade him, I mean, the headliner of the caravan is a guy that can't get regular playing time once every 2 weeks. All of the arguments I made about Lopez on the caravan, I think, remain true, whether or not they already had an inkling of an idea that they were going to make a trade or cut him or do whatever they were going to do. The presence of star players on the caravan was abysmal. And I stand by that no matter what. And
I think it's not the case that, this trade had to happen for Alejo Lopez to get cut. Like, I think this was just showing us that if there was going to be someone, like if Chad Pender was going to be added to the roster, Alejo Lopez was going to get cut. Like, he was the first dude on the chopping block, which just reinforced our point about, why was he on the caravan?
David checks in. I can't wait to see what you do with this one, Jeffrey. Now that the Reds have Benson for the outfield, why not move Senzel back to third? It's a less injury-prone position, and it's his natural position. Well, I would argue that it's not a less injury prone position. The Reds have moved guys off of third base because they were getting hurt. Rhys Hines was moved off of third base because he kept getting hurt. The second piece of that is you don't move Senzel because you need a right-hander in that platoon. We've talked about Benson's highest, most optimal usage is as the lefty in a lefty-righty platoon situation. You still need a right-hander out there. And then the last piece for me is you've got Ellie De La Cruz coming. You've got Matt McClain coming. You've got Edwin Arroyo coming. You've got, who did I forget? I forgot somebody else. You got a lot of shortstops coming. Yeah, you got a lot of guys coming. Senzel's time his time is over. It's center field or nothing, I think, at this point.
And I think that if it's not center field, it's super utility. It's move him around, play him where you need him, that type of deal. Because I don't think if you go to David Bell and you say, well, you can't play him in center field, I don't think David Bell's going to be like, well, it's a position battle between Nick Senzel and Spencer Steer now. Like, I think they are very it's the reason that they got rid of Moose. They're very bullish on the idea of starting Spencer Steer at third base for the majority of the season, at least until you've got guys like Encarnacion Strand and Ellie De La Cruz in tow, and just say, okay, let's see what he can do with regular playing time at one position. Because we've noted Spencer Steer is okay moving around the diamond, but there's also this debatable topic of, if you put a guy at one position and he excels at that position, how does that affect his batting? Does it make it better? And I think that there's a little bit of experimentation going on with that with Spencer Steer.
If you haven't watched the interview that I did with Spencer Steer right before he got called up, jump back in our archives. It's in the Lefty in the Bullpen section. Go check that out. And listen, Spencer was very clear that he likes moving around. He's a super team guy. I really can't wait to see exactly what happens with him. But listen, Jeff, for the audio only listeners, I think that's a good spot right now that we'll go ahead and wrap it up. For the audio only folks, the rest of the Q&A will be available as a bonus episode coming out in your podcast feeds a little bit after this one. But for the YouTube people, stick around. I'm going to do a quick wrap right here, and then we'll just keep rolling with your questions and comments. But for the audio folks, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Coming up next week, ladies and gentlemen, pitchers and catchers are reporting. Baseball is back, baby, and we are going 5 days a week. That's right. We're expanding back out to our full-time schedule. We will be in your feeds Monday through Friday, keeping you locked in all of the Cincinnati Reds baseball action. Now that you've made the Locked On Reds podcast your first listen, go make the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast your second listen. Lindsey Crosby's the host over there, and he is a prospect encyclopedia. He's going to give you all of the information you need on Major League Baseball's stars of tomorrow. That is the Locked On MLB Prospects podcast. It is free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like Locked On Reds. And we're going to be here for you again, starting 5 days a week. Next week, spring training starting, and we're going to keep you locked on Reds every single day. All right, guys, you guys are doing great in the comment section. This is a lot of fun. We haven't even made a dent in this thing yet, Jeff. So let's just keep rolling right with it. Let's see here. Have you watched any of this? I thought this was a good question. Johan's asking if you've watched any of the Caribbean series. Have you checked any of this out?
I have not got a chance to, but I know that Doug has tweeted about it, and I know some folks have been talking about that. It's been very entertaining baseball, very good baseball to watch as well.
BR7, Ian Jabot, this guy's British, blimey. I can hear that kind of in a British accent. That's very, very good. Calvin's asking, do you remember the name of the German player that the Reds had a few years back that had power but disappeared? He was a first baseman, right? Lutz.
Donald Lutz, yeah.
Lutz.
I think he played a little bit of first base, but he's mostly a corner outfielder.
Oh, I only ever remember him playing first base in spring training when Joey was done for the day. Those are my memories of him.
Yeah, Donald Lutz. I want to say he came off the bench a couple of times in the regular season, but yeah, it was one of those where his off the field story was really interesting. He just never quite caught on the field.
All right, now we're going to get to the fun part. People were answering something I said earlier. BR7 wants you to know that he was real. We're talking about Pedro Guerrero. Greg checks in and says, Pedro was great for the Dodgers. Come on, Jeff. Yes, Pedro was great for the Dodgers. I looked up the stats while we were doing the show prep because I was absolutely just mind blown that Jeff didn't know who this guy was. Pedro Guerrero played 16 big league seasons. He was a 300 hitter for his 16 big league seasons, and Jeff doesn't even know the guy's name. Come on, man, as they would say on ESPN.
I don't know. I wasn't born yet.
Jeez, thanks. Pat talking about Nick Senzel says Senzel seems primed to be non-tendered after this season. Could you see them doing that? Could you see them actually non-tendering him?
It just depends because he got a raise this year, but it was only a slight raise. He's not making a ton of money. So I think that if they're going to non-tender him, it's for financial reasons. And I don't necessarily think that he's going to be that expensive. So the question is going to be, is he actually holding up a roster spot from someone? And then you'll look at the non-tendering thing. But I don't know. I would put that chance at less than 25%.
And he doesn't have a lot of trade value. So, I mean, it's either
there's no trade value.
I mean, I guess I can see where the question comes from in that if they do got to move him to make space, the only way to do that is to cut him, because there's really not going to be anything that they could get in return.
Again, the only thing you'd get for Nick Senzel is a Nick Senzel type player from the other team. It's just going to be like Robert Stevenson for Jeff Hoffman, which, by the way, I found out Robert Stevenson is a Pittsburgh Pirate. Did not know that. So we're going to get to face him this year.
Oh, maybe we can talk some smack at Ethan. You know, yeah. I always look forward to doing the crossovers with Locked On Pirates.
Oh, yeah.
Calvin asks, is there any news on updates to Great American Ballpark or the experience the Reds are going to be providing this year? I know they've got a sports book now.
Yeah. That one started January 1st, and that's open all year long. You can go, it's like facing the entrance to Heritage Bank Arena. I always forget. They change the name of the bank every other year, but where the Cyclones play, it faces right there. But other than that, I've not heard of anything. I know that, you know, in the middle of spring training, we'll hear the update about what's new in the food of the ballpark, because I know that that's a topic that's come up this off season. There's some that don't believe the food options are that great at Great American. Now, yeah, I don't agree with you, but I also would agree if you're looking for something that is like sort of health conscious a little bit, you're not going to find a whole lot. Like they're going to be like, there's water over here, but
you know where the best, do you want to know where the best food at Great American Ballpark is?
Fry box.
Across the street at the taco joint. What is it called? Whatever the taco joint is across the street. I go there.
Okay.
I go there every time.
Have you had the bread cone parfait at the Smokehouse?
No, I have not.
It's good.
Okay. We'll try it, because to the point of this question with the experiences, you know, I am coming into town for the first week. So I am doing some experiences, folks. So I've got opening day. I'm going to be with Jeff. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then regular wandering the ballpark on the second game of the season, third game of the season, diamond seats, baby. I have got myself some diamond seats.
I haven't done that.
And then when the Cubs come to town, I will be at the Handlebar. So I am doing some ballpark experiences. I will report back in a couple, maybe lefty in the bullpen shorts, or while I'm in town, talking about these experiences that I'm going to have, so that you all can decide if you want to pony up the extra bucks to do a couple of these things. I'm really looking forward to it, Jeff.
I don't blame you. That was one thing that I feel like over the last few years, they've really spent a lot of attention on the premium experiences at Great American Ballpark. They need to kind of, you know, circle their way back for, you know, common man Reds fan, and not be like, yes, we have this new thing, but you have to buy a table, and the table itself is about $6,000. Like, oh, Boone County Press Club is just like, come on, guys, like seriously.
Yeah, I was talking to the ticket guy about that, and he quoted me the price, and I'm like, moving on.
Yeah, like the season tickets. Like, I mean, come on.
Greg Hughes wants you to know that Pedro killed the Reds all the time, Jeff. You know,
so did Bill Hall. just saying, like, there's lots of guys that kill the Reds, but that's one guy. Like, I mean, had I watched him, I'd probably remember him, because I'm going to remember Bill Hall for the rest of my life. And there's probably few outside of Brewers fans and Reds fans that give a darn about Bill Hall.
Poofy haired fancy boy. Love this guy. Thanks for being here, Poofy Hair. He checks in and asks, can someone explain why Major League Baseball players seem to get hurt more these days than they were in the past? It doesn't make any sense. I think there's a lot of reasons for this. From the pitching side of things, pitchers are trying to do things that pitchers in the past never tried to do. These maximum effort, maximum rotation, spin as much rotation as you can, are damaging to arms. And I think that's why we see more injuries. You know, if you look back at the history of pitchers, you can count on one hand over between say the 50s and the 80s, guys that could throw the ball 100 miles an hour. Now everybody throws the ball 100 miles an hour. That's why you see more injuries on the pitching side. On the hitting side of things, I don't have it as an easy of an explanation for the Reds. I think the Reds blamed a lot of what went down with all of the injuries on the strength and conditioning guys and on the medical staff, because they fired them all and brought in new people.
I think, and I've heard this talked about by a number of different people, whether they be, youth sports coaches or physical trainers or things like that. There is so much more specialization in youth sports nowadays, where like people will determine, well, this kid's really good at baseball and he's got a really good arm, or he's got a great approach at the plate or something like that, and they almost hone in too early. And you've got kids that play baseball all year long, whether you're talking about school leagues, summer leagues, winter leagues, travel ball, all this other stuff, and they almost build their lives around it. And in one sense, that's great because you're setting the kid up for his future. But in the other sense, I think that there's been a lot of debate about this, and there's people that are far more smarter about the subject than I am that can talk, more in depth about it. But there's something to be said about kids that just spend their lives getting ready for a career that they will hope that they have. And it's kind of set them up for failure, at least early on. I mean, that's why you've heard about people who, in the minor leagues, they get drafted and a year later they have their second Tommy John surgery, because there's kids who are 16 who are having Tommy John surgery because they've pitched for their entire lives. So it's a very strange thing. And it's the way that our culture has developed, because I mean, we joke about it all the time. It's like, hey, you have a son, let's train him to throw a ball with his left hand, because he's probably going to have a pretty nice career doing that. I mean, I know it didn't work out for you, Steve. That's okay. But, but
okay. No, all right.
Hey, it didn't work out for me throwing with my right hand, I'll tell you that. So I can throw sunflower seeds with my right hand into my mouth. That's about as good as I can do on a baseball field. But no, and actually, to your point, too, about the 100% pitching, I know I've gone a little bit long with this thought, but I heard an awesome take, and I was very happy to hear it on Baseball America's podcast when they were talking about the Reds minor league system. They said that the biggest development for Chase Petty over the last year is that he pitched really well at 90% or at 95%. And that's just something that people aren't doing anymore, which I was happy to hear that. So, that's one guy who's coming up through the system that we know for a fact isn't going 100% on every pitch.
BR7 tried to get this question in last Aloha Friday, and it was too late. So I'm going to get it in here this time for him. He says, Jeff and Steven, can you guys do a show on what all of these new stats? He's talking about WAR. He's talking about OPS, OPS plus. I use OPS plus all the time. These stats, he doesn't quite understand what they all mean and wants to know if we can do a show. He says he's an old baseball fan and he doesn't understand all of them. Jeff, I don't know that we can. I don't know about doing a whole show because I think people would tune us out. But I've often thought about maybe trying to make a list of these stats, the ones we like anyway, and then just dropping one into every episode and taking a minute. Like an actual literal minute, and just explaining what that stat is, and working that in between now and the start of the season, so that when we get to opening day, we've kind of done a statistics primer for everybody that doesn't know all of these stats, so that when we talk about them once the season starts, everybody's kind of on the same page.
I just marked that down. We'll make like a couple seconds, maybe like a segment or something on different shows throughout spring training, because you're right. I mean, there are some statistics that do need a little bit of explanation and things like that. Like a lot of them are just because they figured out a way to take all of the counting stats and put them into like a formula and then put them into one number. And that's kind of where we get these different numbers like that. So yeah, that'd be a good idea.
All right, let's see what else we got here, Jeff. I failed to scroll while you were talking.
People who know their
math.
That
always puts me behind. Here we go. Jimmy McFarland. This is going to be a fun one. He asks if we are keeping up with Joey Votto on Instagram. Listen, there was supposed to be a segment on Joey and his chess playing this week, but things kind of got derailed with my schedule and Jeff didn't get to talk about it. So yeah, I'm following Joey Votto on social media, and I think Joe Burrow is styling him right now, because the stuff that Joey Votto is wearing to these chess matches, I think probably came right out of Joe Burrow's closet.
The Gucci, I think it was Gucci outfit that he had in that video was absolutely hilarious. And there's not a soul that watches that and doesn't like it. Like, I think that Joey Votto has transformed his legacy a little bit. Like, his legacy was always that of a good player, but he was kind of quiet. And now his legacy is that of a good player and an entertaining person. And it's kind of cool to see.
Poofy Harris, I love the chess picks and I love it. Absolutely love it. Hey, Calvin asked a great question. I don't know how deep you want to go on this, Jeff, because this could almost be a whole episode, because I did see this article and I thought it was super interesting. Calvin asked if we saw the article in The Athletic. They had a recent post about a proposed realignment when Major League Baseball does another expansion to 32 teams. I don't know if you caught this article, but it was basically ditching the American and the National League and going to true regional setups with, a Northeast section and a North section. And I want to say the Reds, it was like the Reds, Cleveland, Detroit, Toronto, and maybe one other. Maybe that was it. But Pittsburgh was going someplace else.
Teams in there.
The Chicago was, so it was like both the Chicagos and Milwaukee and Minnesota.
Okay.
Formed, so it was truly regionalized, and I don't think it's a bad idea. The difference, now that the differences between the leagues has gone away, I don't know that you have to keep this American National League format. You could really go to a regional groupings, true regional groupings that I think would be entertaining. If the Reds had Cleveland and Detroit and one other in their division, I don't know about Toronto because they're usually pretty good, but anybody else, give me Kansas City, and I'm happy. Yes.
Maybe Pittsburgh.
I don't think this is a bad idea.
No, I like that. And I'll have to go back and check the article out myself. But the idea of regional realignment, I mean, baseball is a regional sport anyway. And I've never understood why and Justin and I were talking about this off air before our episode about Will Benson. We never understood why the Reds and Guardians have this rivalry. Obviously it's because they're in the same state, but they have this rivalry and they play 4 games a year. Like, okay. Like, in the course of an 162 game season, who cares who wins those 4 games? Like, it's nice. You want to win every game that you get, but especially when you have the 4 game series and there's an ability to tie the Ohio Cup, and plus, I just want to refer to it as the Ohio Cup as much as possible throughout the year. So give me more games against Cleveland and give me some games. I don't understand why there's not at least some form of friendly rivalry between the Reds and the Tigers. The Reds never play the Tigers, and they're one of the quickest trips for the Reds. Like, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I don't know why they don't play them.
And it would be great for a lot of reasons. It would limit travel. The players would be less tired. Everybody can kind of settle into a better routine. I like it. I mean, yeah, you know what, guys? I think there could be at least a full segment on a future show about this. Jeff, you read up on this article and we'll dig into it, because I thought it was a great proposal. I really did.
Making plans on a Friday.
Jared on Vinyl says Will Benson is exciting. There's that outfield trade that we were watching for. Yeah, we were wondering if they were going to go out and do something, and Nick Krall kept saying things to make me think they weren't going to go out and do something, and he surprised us, and I'm really glad that he did. I truly think if Benson plays at all to his potential, that this outfield can be a whole lot better this year than it was last year.
I think, and it was interesting because, Zordon commented earlier, but he commented on our episode from yesterday, and he was like, this looks like Brandon Phillips trade 2.0. And that's exactly the take that I was coming back with too. Like, just hope Benson lives up to that.
And,
I mean, not necessarily lives up to Brandon Phillips' potential, but, he's that guy that the Reds got for next to nothing that all of a sudden blossomed into a good major leaguer.
Yeah, you and Greg are on the same page. He says the last few unknowns that we got from Cleveland, Brandon Phillips and Sean Casey. He has big hopes for Benson. Hey, if he ends up having a career that's as notable as those two guys had while they played for the Reds, I will take that every day.
You're talking about two Reds Hall of Famers right there. I mean, that's some big shoes to fill and live up to for Will Benson. But hey, who knows?
Poofy heritage. Listen, if you're watching the show live on YouTube, make sure you just scroll and see Poofy stuff. He's very clever, but I can't put it in the show. But he's very funny. Just go check it out. We're not talking about the baseball bats in the locker room, Poofy. I'm not doing it. Jimmy McFarland says that Alejo Lopez reminded him of Bip Roberts. Jeff, do you know who Bip Roberts is?
I do know.
Okay, well,
I feel like that might be an over.
I think that Bip Roberts probably had a little bit more pop in his bat than Alejo Lopez did, but the hustle, the base stealing, the being able to move around multiple positions, yeah, those are similar. But I think Bip Roberts occasionally would hit 1 yard. I think he had just a little bit more power.
There was more to Bip Roberts, I think, in saying, I don't know. I think that might be a disservice to Bip Roberts comparing Alejo Lopez to him.
The over-under question, Jeffrey. Here you go. The over-under on Nick Senzel playing 100 games this year.
I don't know about DraftKings, but I know
FanDuel have those odds. Yeah.
Over-under 100 games. Let's make it 100.5 so you can't push. I'm going to say under.
You're going to take the over, aren't you?
No, I'm saying under. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. It's so hard to say over with him because the most, what was it? The most he played was last year, and I think it was 114. I'm trying to remember that off the top of my head. But yeah.
Yeah, if in this scenario, I would take the under as well. The body of work says that that's not a safe bet to take the over there.
No. And the odds on that should be pretty good. If you bet the over and you hit the over, you should get a little bit of money there. Because 100 just seems rough.
Poofy's saying he'll play 40 or 50. I think it'll be more than that. I would, if the over under was at 85, if the over under was at 85, I would take the over.
Yeah, 88.
I think.
Yeah. It also depends too on how good he is, because if he continues to struggle early on in the season and we start making some call ups, then he's going to be one of those guys that it's like, okay, we have him on the bench, for insurance, but we're not expecting anything out of him. So we're going to play some other guys more than him. So there's health. Sure. That's always a concern with Nick Senzel, but he's coming to the point in his career where, like you said, like it is a make or break season for him, to the point that if he still is breaking, I think they're going to go elsewhere.
Jimmy McFarland says that you and I mentioned Matt McLain a lot. What about Austin Hendricks? Well, here's the thing with Austin Hendricks. He's plummeting on everybody's lists. It's just not the fact that we're not talking about him. He's just not really developed and come along in a way that everybody had kind of hoped that he was going to.
He, the Baseball America podcast that I listened to that was talking about Chase Petty, they were talking about the Reds farm system as a whole, and they also looked at Austin Hendrick and they grouped him together with Rhys Hines, and they said that the problem with both those guys are the Reds picked them out of high school, and what they were known for was their power, and they thought what was going to happen was the hit tool would come along. They would learn how to have plate discipline, they would learn pitch recognition and all that stuff. And it just hasn't happened. Austin Hendricks strikes out a lot. Like, I think it was like 50% last year of the time he struck out. It was really high. And on top of that, he has health concerns as well. So there's a lot of work that he has to do to really put himself back on the Reds' radar, to say nothing of anyone else's radar.
There's a great conversation surrounding Nick Senzel in the chat, Jeff, and basically, a large portion of the commenters are kind of done with the Nick Senzel experiment. They're questioning, his desire to really like play the game and be successful. I don't buy into that. And I know he's done some things that haven't sat well. Someone mentions, him laughing and just like eating chips in the dugout after he got hurt, hurt the toe or whatever. And I granted he's not always handled himself well, but I think he has a desire to be a successful big leaguer, and I just think it hasn't worked out for him.
I'm not one to question, the desire of a player. I'm not going to go there. I don't know what he can do from a production standpoint. I mean, he really would have to go off. He would really have to increase all of his production across the board, base running, hitting, defense, everything, for me to say, okay, he really is part of the Reds' future plans, because I think we're moving past that point.
Greg Hughes wants to sign Donovan Solano with a slash line of 284, 339, 385, and 80 games last season. Where are you going to play him? And who are you willing to sit? Are you going to make Donovan Solano your shortstop and sit Newman? And then what do you do when Ellie De La Cruz comes? Do you move Jonathan India to DH and make Solano the second baseman? I mean, that's the first question. Second question is, I think Solano is going to ultimately go someplace where he can win a little bit. So,
yeah. And that's where I land with Solano too, is that if the Reds thought that they were close to contention, they would sign him. But the stated goal for this year is figure out where you've got guys, where your top prospects are landing, how good are they, really try to close the gap from where the Reds are to where their window of contention is. Because like we have said in the past, we think that they can get that window open in 2024. But in order to do that, you've got to play the young guys this year. This year is about playing those young guys and figuring out who you have. And if you sign Donovan Solano, you're going to be taking playing time away from guys that you need to figure out. You got to figure out what you got with Spencer Steer. That's why they got rid of Mike Moustakas. So I can't see them going out and signing Donovan Solano and then saying, hey, we'll put him in the lineup, we'll play him at third base, and take at bats away from Spencer Steer.
I mean, we don't very often define something as having a 0% chance of it happening, but I think there's a 0% chance that the Reds are going to go out and sign Donovan Solano. There's just, the money's not going to work. The ability to have a place for him to play is not going to work. It doesn't fit into the plan. And so, yeah. I mean, very, very rare for me to say 0% chance, but I think 0% chance that they would go out and do that. Hey, our friend David Pemberton is checking in the chat. Jeff, David, we will see you opening day. I know that for a fact. He asked, what is our take on the map that was recently out on Twitter showing population density near each MLB sports market? The Reds were near the top of that chart. Did you see this thing that he's talking about? I vaguely remember it.
And a lot of it just had to do with the fact that there's really no teams that are geographically close to the Reds. Like, I think the closest one is, I can't remember if it's Pittsburgh or if it's Chicago, but they're both pretty similar distance away. And even if there were a team in Nashville, you're still talking a lot of population that the Reds, the kind of Reds country, we always talk about this, ambiguous Reds country and things like that, and how there really is no defined border to it. But you can kind of estimate this area around Cincinnati and how there are a lot of people that are within the television viewing range of the Reds. And it seems as though the Reds have almost forgotten that. And they like, okay, well, we're going to be good eventually. It's like, if you were good year in and year out, you would constantly have TV revenue. You'd constantly have people, wanting to come to the ballpark because you've got all these people that are close enough to Cincinnati. Like, because they always talk about, well, Cincinnati is one of the smaller television markets, but that's literally considering the city of Cincinnati and not the area that surrounds it.
All right, we have crossed the 1 hour mark, Jeff. So let's take a few more of these and then we will wrap it up for the day. Joseph Nelson's in the chat and he thinks he's a funny guy. He just wonders, in my long broadcasting career, did I ever have long hair? No.
That time you knew who Pedro Guerrero was, right?
Oh my God. No, I never had long hair. Funny story. I had great head of hair until my freshman year of high school. And the seniors made all of the freshmen on the football team shave their head, and it never grew back right after that. And by the time I graduated from high school, it was already time to give up the dream and go to the buzz cut. So
whenever
my heads look like this for a long time.
whenever people say don't shave your head because it might not grow back, you're the cautionary tale.
I am the cautionary tale, my friend.
That's great.
Let's finish up with this because we have not talked about this guy at all, and I know you have some opinions. Pat says that he looked at Luke Weaver's game logs from the last couple of seasons because he was curious, and it seems that most of the games he started were pretty decent starts, besides a couple of blow-up starts or injuries, and that skewed the numbers, basically. Do you see a scenario where Weaver is a starter for this team in 2023?
I do, simply because they know they can throw him out there every fifth day, and whatever he does, he's just eating innings for this team. They're going to say, you're going out, you're throwing 6 innings, because that's what they did with Mike Minor last year. They essentially found a more cost-effective Mike Minor. Like, Mike Minor was making, I think it was $10 million last year to do what he did. And if Luke Weaver does what Mike Minor does,
they didn't pay that much, but yeah, there was some cash trading back and forth, and part of Amir Garrett's salary and a whole thing. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, but even then, you're still getting a discounted rate for probably what Mike Minor did last year. And if we look at Luke Weaver and we say, if you got an ERA that's in the low 5s for the season, then I think you've done your job. And I think that's probably what we're going to get out of Luke Weaver. That's why whenever they signed him, I kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. I said, oh, great. He's a veteran in the sense that he's pitched before. But that's really what they're looking for. They're just looking for a fifth guy that they can run out there, and they don't have to beat up a rookie for that one day.
Let's hit just a couple more of these while I'm looking for one. Mark's
also, and I forgot about, before you answer that, I always forget about this when we talk about Luke Weaver. Do you remember what trade he was involved in? Because he was the headline prospect that the Diamondbacks got whenever they traded Paul Goldschmidt to St. Louis. The headline prospect. Okay. So it's kind of funny to think about that. Like, at one time, he was regarded well enough to trade for Paul Goldschmidt.
Let's hit a few more. Let's just buzz through these. Mark's asking what I'm drinking over here, Jeff.
Is it Elijah Craig? Look like Elijah Craig.
It was Elijah Craig. He also says, it's like 9 a.m. in Hawaii. It's a little early, isn't it? Listen,
he works nice.
I came straight from work and did this show, so this is the end of my day. But yeah, it is a little early in Hawaii.
That's why this is water, because my day is just really
right, because we're on opposite ends of the calendar right now. Let's see what else we got. Is there anything we want to throw in here before we get out of here, Jeff? Sorry. I'm trying to go fast, Jeff. Sorry,
thinking while you're doing some scrolling, think for next week, everybody, because I know that we've seen some repeat folks, which, by the way, thank you so much for joining us each and every week here on Fridays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time for the Aloha Live edition. And we've seen some folks come back a couple of different times. For those of you that will be joining us again next Friday, have a thought in your head, because I'm curious who everybody thinks is going to be this team's MVP this year. Because I think I know, but I don't want it to be like, I want to get your guys' take on this, because I'm curious. So I don't think I have the same take, but we'll see.
Here you go, Jeff. Locked On Pirates checks in and says, how's our NL Central best friends doing? Ethan over at Locked On Pirates is my favorite guy to razz on the whole network, you guys. He's a Georgia Bulldogs fan, first of all. That's terrible. He needs to there's still room for him to check out some Ohio State games. I'm going to try and make that happen. So that's the first terrible part. The second terrible part is he's a Pirates guy in the National League Central. So terrible times 2. It's just bad all the way around. I love to give him static, but the problem is I talk a lot of smack at him and it always blows up in my face. So there we go. But Ethan's a great guy. If you have interest in other teams in our division, guys, jump around to the other Locked On shows, and Ethan's is a good one to figure out what's going on with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
I have been saying that I think that the Pirates are getting better. And let me see if I can show this. Make sure. Yeah. Well, no, I won't show it, but I'll let you know. I took the over on Pittsburgh Pirates wins. It was set at 67.5, and I took the over. So just to let you know, staying on brand, but I'm putting some money behind what I'm saying. I think the Pirates are going to be better this year.
All right, 2 questions, and then we're out, guys. I know we didn't get to everybody, but that's the beauty. We're going to do it again next week. So here's our second to last. This comes from Anthony. Can India hit 30 home runs this year if healthy? Absolutely. Yes. I think 30 is probably like the mid-level. I could see him going a couple over, a couple under, but 30 sounds about right to me.
30 with an on-base percentage of around 360.
Oh, we agree, Jeff. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And then we'll go here to wrap up on a positive note. Hey, what's good, fellas? You think we can be a surprise wild card sleeper? I know that's a steep stretch. Well, Jeff thinks they're going to win 75 games, so that puts them squarely in contention for the final wild card spot. I've said all along that this team has the ability to stumble its way into being a contender for that final spot. Listen, not win the division, not be the number 1 wild card team, but stumble their way if some things go their way. I don't know that it's that far-fetched to talk about them being relevant into September, and then whatever happens at that point. But I think we could reach September 1st and the Reds could still be hanging around and forcing people to pay attention and talk about them.
I think so. I always think of like the chart that they use when they're talking about playoff scenarios, and they give like a percentage chance of what's going to happen. I think if you gave a percentage chance of the Reds winning the division, it's less than 1%. If you gave the percentage chance of the Reds making the wild card, it's like 2 or 3%. You literally have to have everything. Everything has to go right. Joey Votto has to have a comeback player of the year campaign. You got to have a rookie of the year campaign from Ellie De La Cruz, maybe a runner-up rookie of the year campaign from Will Benson. You've got to have all 3 starting pitchers in Green, Lodolo, and Ashcraft stay healthy and take a step further. You have to have Alexis Diaz stay healthy and take a step further, or at least continue what he did last year. Lucas Sims, TJ Antone, Tony Santillan all return from injury back to pre-injury forms. You're going to have Tyler Stevenson and Jonathan India not get hurt and continue to play well. Jonathan India probably does have to hit the higher side of 30 and get on base maybe even more than 36% of the time. We're talking about a lot. A lot has to happen. They all have to go right, but that's the beauty of things. Sometimes everything goes right. That's why it's like a 2%. I give him a 2% chance of making the wild card.
Wow. All right. Ethan puts 2 rings. Yeah, I know Georgia won 2 rings. So I can't talk any smack at him. And the final comment on the screen for the day is going to come from Greg saying, Jeff taking the over. Shocker. And on that note, ready. Jeff, wrap us up.
Get ready. The over is getting taken a lot more once we get some like individual player statistics on FanDuel. We'll keep our eye out for that. We're going to keep our eye out for a lot of different things. How Reds are going to play in the World Baseball Classic as Alexis Diaz, Revar Sanmartin, Ian Gibaut, Teheran Guerrero, Luis Cessa. They're all going to be pitching in the World Baseball Classic, and we're going to be watching. Plus, as spring training, as everybody starts reporting next week, we're going to be telling you who's in the best shape of their lives and how everything's going to fare this. Yeah, not us. During the spring training time. Plus, you can bet that we are going to take the over on some things when it comes to the Cincinnati Reds because we are locked on Reds every single day.